I don't want you to be traumatized. I want to tell you, Ermias was more beautiful in death than he was in life. Ermias didn't have any marks on him when I viewed him. His hair was perfect. There was not one strand of hair that was out of place. All of the love and all of the compassion and all of the caring and the truthfulness and the generosity and the honesty, all of the compassion, just all of the good things that were inside of Ermias' heart is as if they lifted off of his heart and they transferred to his face. His face was beautiful and had complete peacefulness. Beautiful. I looked at him and I said, that's my angel baby. Yes. Because now he's a baby in the spirit world. He's beginning his life in the spirit world. Death is not to be feared. Death is something to prepare yourself for. And when you walk this earth and you do good deeds for people and you are loving and kind, those are the things that will show on your face. You will look more beautiful. Ermias looked healthy. He looked clean.
Oh, this is beautiful.
He had a glow. He was radiant.
Yes.
And he was so perfect that he had a sweet aroma.
Oh.
He had a sweet aroma. He even smelled good.
Wow.
So please do not fear death. Death is just the beginning of a wonderful world. And I tell myself, Ermias liked thrilling things, and now my son knows the mystery, the secret rather, to the mystery of life. Yes. Ashe.
So here's the thing, guys. I make a conscious effort not to make celebrity death videos and blogs on a consistent basis for several reasons. But I have decided to dedicate this video to the legacy of Nipsey Hussle because I feel as if his death has created a space, not only in the African American community, not only in the hip hop community, but for really our society as a whole to have an open and honest discussion about death and dying. Whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, a lot of times when someone passes away, especially violently, we have a tendency to make death our enemy, or make death the culprit, or blame death that whoever it is that's passed away is no longer here anymore. And that has created such an unhealthy and unrealistic dialogue surrounding the topic of death and dying. And I'm seeing a lot of that, not only on social media, but in the conversations that I'm overhearing about the death of Nipsey Hussle. In the video that I played just before I started talking, you hear his mother describe how she's at peace and described that Nipsey, her son, how her son was such a thrill seeker, and that because he's no longer bound to his physical form, he's able to experience the mysteries of life through death. And to me, that resonated so much because it lets me know that not only does she have an understanding of death and dying through her grieving process. Yes, she wasn't crying and she wasn't hollering or anything in the video. She honestly looked gorgeous. And that does not mean that she's not grieving. But it also lets me know that if she was an influence in his life, which she obviously was, or an active part in his life, which she obviously was, that he had that understanding and that he did not fear death. And a lot of times I think our perspective of death is so limited because we're not having open and honest conversations about the naturalness of death, or the fact that we all have to die at some point. We're born to die. Each and every person that you know, each and every person that you will ever come in contact or see in passing is going to pass away. You're going to pass away. I'm going to pass away at some point. Death is real. And again, I feel as if Nipsey's death has created a space where people are open to having this conversation. And there are a few things that I think we can learn from not only his life, but his death. And the first is that, you know, it is important to celebrate people while they are alive and here with us. And by that, I mean, who was Nipsey Hussle before March 31st, 2019? Who was he to you? Did you know who he was? I have to be honest and say that all I knew about him was that he was an hip hop artist and that he was romantically tied to Lauren London. Outside of that, I didn't know anything about him. But on March 31st, it's like his death sent a major vibration, as my friend would say, through the universe. And I feel as if sometimes we are so comfortable with those that we love being here, so detached from the fact that death is a promised reality, that we forget to celebrate those who we have around us and give them their flowers as they live and breathe. We wait until they've passed away to tell the world how much they meant to us or how much they've influenced us. But we never say it to that person. So in his death, let's take the opportunity to stop and pause and let those that we love know what they mean to us. The second thing that we can learn from his death is that we all have the power to influence those around us. And by that, I mean, even if you're not doing it on a major level, like, you know, maybe you don't own a store, maybe you're not a Grammy nominated artist, but you're someone who can make a positive impact in someone else's life that's immediately tied to you. Take that opportunity, because obviously what we've seen from the response received or the response given around the world, you know, he's now #1 on Apple Music. You know, he wasn't before his death, so he didn't know. You know, he's not here to see that, and I'm assuming that where he is in the spirit realm or wherever he's gone, those things don't matter anymore. But how good might it have felt to him to feel this love when he was here? The last thing that I want us to take from this is that it is okay to grieve. It is okay to express your loss, but at the same time, let's not get lost in a certain stage of grief. Everyone right now is hurting. Our community is reeling from this loss, especially with it being such a violent loss. And there's a very unhealthy narrative surrounding the conversation of his death. Instead of worrying about what happened or whether it was the government or whether it was tied to the documentary or whether it was gang violence or not, let's focus on the fact that he's no longer here. And that's real. That's real. And not only is that a reality for those who were closest to him and his fans and the community at whole, but it's going to be a reality for us. Let's have conversations about death and dying so that when someone does pass away, we aren't reeled with shock and denial. And I think that the fact that we do not have conversations again about death and dying and how natural death is and how natural the grieving process is, it opens the door for us to get stuck in certain stages of the grieving process, like shock or anger or depression, which are all natural responses to grief and loss. However, it's important to understand that grief comes in stages and it's not steps. You don't just take one step and you're over it. Like I said, his mother may not have been crying in that video, but she may be in the acceptance stage right now. Let's take the time through witnessing Nipsey Hussle's death to educate ourselves not only about death and dying and accept death and dying as a reality for our mortality, but let's take this opportunity to educate ourselves and our communities about the grieving process. There was a study done on some people who were incarcerated, whether in juvenile detention or in, you know, a regular prison. And they were focused specifically on those who had violent crimes, and it was learned that those who had experienced or witnessed or those who had experience with unresolved grief were, however, much more likely to commit violent crimes in the future. Now, when I heard this in mortuary school, it immediately made me think that, wow, what would happen if we learned about grief and the grieving process to at a young age? And even if we weren't given access to therapy, what if we could navigate the grieving process a little bit better because we knew what it was? Death is one of those things where unless you're in it or unless you're faced with it, a lot of times in our society, we just won't talk about it until it happens. And Nipsey's death has been my call to action to go even deeper about discussing the grieving and mourning process. My name is Joelle Simone Anthony. I'm also known as the Grave Woman. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Live life, love hard, and I'll talk to you next time.